Greetings, viewers. This is Acid Roots. So I'm going to talk to you about VYP, Lil Mama's debut and basically only album. Lil Mama put this out in the spring of 2008, and she had crested for a year and a half or so with the promotion of VYP, which had a number of kind of dance cut singles and things like that. Or I basically see Lil Mama kind of in the same vein as Soulja Boy, maybe like a female version of Soulja Boy or Bow Wow, those type folks. A little bit of Jibbs' Chain Hang Low, and like a little bit of Jibbs' Chain Hang Low and Huey's Pop Lock and Drop It in there was kind of like some classroom rap and that type of stuff. If you're basically a student, late high school, early college, that type stuff, or you're still kind of a minor, it's got some stuff in mind. But I give this record credit just because it had a number of dance cuts on here and a number of ways to kind of get you up and moving, kind of in a youthful sense and definitely in a ringtone sense. I mean, this is kind of an album that relishes in kind of like ringtone rap and kind of more jingles and kind of just jingles. I mean, I think that's the correct word for like commercial jingle type stuff, that sort of instance for those type things was just quickie type music and a lot of this tacky kind of laffy taffiness about it. But I do give it credit just because it happens to be fun and encouraging and jubilant and that type stuff. Despite the fact that most of this album, in my opinion, kind of feels like a dud, I still give enough of it credit to the sense of being able to say that there is stuff on here to listen to. Despite, when she says voice of the young people, she's not joking, because there's a lot of kind of like silly kind of like kids lullabies that are kind of sung on here, like Humpty Dumpty and some of those type things that you might hear just in that sense. But I just kind of feel like it does have the kinetic energy of being able to say that some of this, when you listen to it in the right setting, it just kind of depends, where not every single album has to be drenched in like busting shots and this overall kind of hate and shootings and that type stuff. So I mean, it's not a very violent project, but it does kind of have like an edge to it in a light sense, but it's kept in almost like a classroom setting. So that's just something to pay attention to. I kind of look after it where the lightheartedness of this project, just if it could have kept that, kind of done what like Chris Brown kind of does, but have had a little bit more edge to it with, a few more curse words and that type of stuff, a little bit more kind of maybe darker song topics and that type of stuff. I think this album probably would have had a lot more poignancy, because it just feels like basically anyone from age 30, some whatever age you are, to about 5, 6, 7 could probably listen to this, where it's intended to be just as something of almost all ages. And it's not a huge derailment, but of course with a project that is PG or something like that, you have to understand that it has to be consumed as such. So you're not really getting the adult Lil Mama, her boyfriend problems and sexual problems and those type things, and drinking problems and relationship problems and things of that nature, as far as that kind of goes, as far as what would happen. But it's just kind of underneath that context, to where it's kind of kept within a relatively clean sense, but it's also done with just a little bit of spunk in there. I mean, it's okay to have that kind of mild spunk, but it's not nearly to the degree that I think if she would have had further albums, it probably would have wound up being, because this is her only project. I mean, to say if you're looking for more Lil Mama, I think she dropped at least one mixtape, but she really didn't have much to really, not in a bad way to say contribute, but she didn't really have much to really contribute in the music world. And it just, cut the they cut her off pretty quickly, and it's disappointing, because I think she really could have been like the next Missy Elliott or something like that, had she been given the territory too. So I'll go ahead and talk about the singles. Like, the first single was Lip Gloss, and this is definitely a ringtone rap type song. And this one came out in the spring of 2007, perfect around that time of songs like Party Like a Rock Star and This Is Why I'm Hot and Chain Hang Low, and those type singles. Those kind of ringtone rap that you'd hear on your phone, you'd hear someone else's phone, that type of stuff. This easy kind of going. I mean, it's really kind of childish. She openly says in this song that it's at school. She has this song was intended for people in the classroom walking down the hall, strutting their stuff as they go to class and stuff. Kind of just having that spunk of being a student spunk in that sort of sense. Song for minors, but I think it can be portrayed as depending upon, I'm sure that there are still women who kind of like this kind of song and grew up on it and are like, yeah, it's probably like, I would almost put it past as like a fetish song in a lot of ways, just to be able to kind of say, to hear this and just remember what it was like, just depending. I mean, that's just kind of, I think it can be intended as like a college song also, but just to kind of say you look after it, there's a concept behind it that kind of goes along with it, that it does have a lot of like puppy love kind of saucy energy to it, just within the sense coming from like someone who's 17, 18, 19, 20, something like that. So it's just kind of the realm behind it. Good song, nice kind of minor dance cut. I mean, it's not so much like a twerk song, it's just like a step in kind of song, just an introductory kind of, this is a song to kick off a dance kind of song. So I appreciate it for that. The second single was G Slide, and this is kind of in the vein of like those children lullabies that I was talking about. Kind of, I really, this is the only single out of the four that I didn't enjoy because it just was a little bit too cutesy and childish, but it does have a decent beat once it gets to the verses, but I don't know how much I could grimace through trying to listen to this song to be able to mesh through it and kind of say, oh, this is a decent bop, when it, most people, if you play this in your whip when you're driving down the street, they're going to think that like, they're going to think that the ice cream man's in town or something like that. It just doesn't really, I mean, it's not primarily a stunting song for very much. It really doesn't have that context. But Shawty Get Loose has Chris Brown and T-Pain on there. This is a good one. Chris Brown delivered a pretty nice hook. Not as addictive as it probably would have been on his singles. Not to say he shortchanged her, but I feel like it's just a mild R&B song. I wish it would have had a little bit more addictiveness towards it, but this was basically this and Lip Gloss were Lil Mama's best singles. These were the two ones that were the breadwinners and the album sellers. But I do like it. This is the closest thing we get to a club bop on this album, the closest thing to kind of like a VIP and dance club and mild kind of club in that sort of sense kind of going. I mean, she was 18, 19 at the time when she made 17, 18, 19 at the time when she made this, but just to kind of say it's decent variation of what to expect from that. Just entry level. If you're like 20, 21, 19, getting ready to go to a club, I'd say this kind of fits its billing, but it is still a nice dance club number just to be able to play and kind of mildly get things started, kind of like Lip Gloss. That's kind of the thing there. And then I would have to say, like, What It Is, Strike a Pose. This one just kind of felt like a breezy kind of this late summer autumn kind of feel towards it. I was surprised the Lil Mama kind of gave off those kind of vibes, just where you're at a house party, not necessarily things haven't gotten started yet, but just kind of the entryway, the handshaking, the dap, the pounds, that kind of stuff, just kind of talking and, you know, as things get ready to kind of get started and with the afternoon and evening and night and so on. This kind of, I do like T-Pain being on here. I'm glad that she featured him twice on this album. I think he contributes towards it, but it's just a shame that this song didn't chart as well as it could have, because Lil Mama did have this record chock full of singles. She at least knew the variables of what she wanted to do for singles, because some people, they have good cuts on their album, but they don't know the expression how to make singles. It seemed like these were songs that very much could have been singles. It's just the variable, the concept behind them just didn't reach the audience it needed to, but at least 2 out of 4 of them did. But out of all 4 of the singles, the only one I really didn't prefer was just G Slide. But minus that, there's really not an overabundance of like songs out of the 13 songs on here that I enjoyed. I feel like a lot of this, songs like Stand Up, Life, College, Broken Pieces, Truly in Love, I mean, a lot of these don't really have like the context of interesting topics, right? I just think it's too soon to kind of have like that kind of hazy malaise of just like growing pains and kind of other turmoils that kind of go along with it. I mean, it's okay, but I can't really think of too many instances where in a social setting it would really mean too much. It just kind of feels like, especially for the younger set, just kind of holed up in your room, on your bed, just wondering what's going on, just in a daze, and it's just, there's not a ton of instances where that would kind of be too affable. But I do feel like when Lil Mama steps out, and I mean, it's too bad she didn't have any female friends. Like Soldier Boy had Arab back in those days, but it's too bad that Lil Mama didn't have like a cute friend or someone like that to kind of assist her, and they could have gone in and done like some girl power type stuff. It would have probably been something. I think that could have been a single if Lil Mama would have had like a BFF or something like that, but she doesn't. She kind of does it alone, and for the most part, it's just kind of I don't want to say lonesome, but it's just kind of a dolo project that doesn't really have terribly much to offer in terms of sparking interest apart from like the singles. And I mean, some people may like G Slide, but I really just preferred the other singles. But I just would have to kind of say to look at a couple other records that I do feel like had some hit power on there. I feel like there were two other songs out of the 13 on here, and those were One Hit Wonder and Pick It Up. And these are both One Hit Wonder is pretty solid album cut. I was surprised by Lil Mama's ferocity on here, and I also like DJ Khaled tacked on at the end. And this kind of gave off some dance vibes in a more ferocious setting. It was kind of surprising that, I mean, if there would have been more songs like that, I would have definitely said this album could have had more spark. I wouldn't have seen it as a single, but for what it was, it did have energy to it. And then Pick It Up was kind of like an entry level dance number, kind of more like if What It Is, Strike a Pose is just getting to the setting. This would be the song to play after What It Is, where you're there at the place where you're getting ready to be for the night, and the music's starting to start. You're starting to get your drinks. You're starting to vibe and chat with some chick or some person and that type of stuff, and just picking it up. I mean, it's called Pick It Up. That's the concept. Is it's starting, the energy's starting to kind of conjure and stuff, and I do appreciate that. So those are about the only ones. So I just would have to say, looking at the rest of this album, out of the 13 songs, I'm going to go ahead and give you the 5 songs out of those that I recommend. So they would be Shawty Get Loose with Chris Brown and T-Pain, One Hit Wonder with DJ Khaled, Pick It Up, What It Is with T-Pain, and then Lip Gloss. Those are the 5. I really feel like, I mean, once again, to kind of reiterate about this, like a lot of these songs just don't have a lot of energy, and even like from an R&B and kind of romantic, I mean, for the most part Lil Mama's just being a flirt, but she doesn't really go in as far as like anything relationship, like, oh, you're my boyfriend, I want you so much, minus maybe like the song Truly in Love. But I mean, it's pretty like happy-go-lucky, and it's just kind of surprising about that. But I just feel like it seemed like Lil Mama's label, I don't know if it's so much her choice that she wanted to be so kind of just like not so much shallow, but just kind of static in terms of like depth to her character. But I think that that's kind of the concept where a lot of these just kind of, she does have her dance cuts, but for the most part, it's not really like she's looking for guys as much as just trying to be a tease. And it's not, I don't mean to say that she's like a tease in that sense, to call her a tease, but it just feels like a lot of this is just superfluous, just strutting my stuff, but not really doing much else than that. And that this is kind of the concept, but I do feel like there are a number of dance cuts on here. I mean, she does have some outgoing cuts. It's just kind of in the sense that it's just very kind of flimsy. Just there's not like juice as far as when you look at like Ashanti saying these things, where she seems like she has more depth towards wanting to hook up, and you look at like Trina, who definitely is trying to smash, and you look at folks like that, Lil Kim, who's trying to smash, and Missy Elliott. But I mean, I know that this is kind of, like I said, this is kind of like almost a PG rated album, but it's just kind of, it's a lot more good, clean fun than what you might expect. So that is kind of the thing. So, but Lip Gloss, Shawty Get Loose, and Pick It Up are all great dance cuts on here. Those are the immediate ones I would go for. And if you can tolerate the kind of sing-songy child bop, kind of child lullaby anthem, I would say G Slide Tour Bus would be another one. But she does have some, but it's just kind of it's a toss up between how much of this is tolerable, because I look after, even despite the records that I like, I don't know how oftenly I would listen to some of these kind of like Ice Cream Man sounding songs in a lot of ways, but there are enough to be able to say that it does have energy, but it just feels like for people who are over the age of like 23, it's kind of almost where it seems like it's not really your age group. I would like to bring some light back to it and kind of give this record more credit just because Lil Mama does have talent. And I feel like even if you think it's kind of a parody to kind of talk about, I still feel like these songs are good enough to kind of get some replayability even if you've outgrown them. And that's kind of the concept, is just being able to say, you could say you've outgrown them, but it's good to go back and just kind of revisit, remember school and early college and that type of stuff, and just kind of the more puppy love and kind of rambunctious side of things. But so I'm going to give this record me liking 5 out of 13. And, there actually are 18 songs on this album, but 5 of them are skits. So 5 out of 13, I'm going to give this album basically a 3.5 out of 10. I think a 3.5 is good enough just to kind of say it's got some meat to this project, but just that the kind of PG elements to this project, and this kind of I know it's voice of the young people, but maybe it's overtly that. It just feels like the label politics and the expression of how it was, where it just is intended for like more like a PBS type channel more so than like actual like MTV and things like that. There's not a lot of. I mean, I just feel like Lil Mama needs more sauce to her. I definitely not so much just like a a fifth grade girl being a tease, but like like an 11th grade girl who gets laid and that type of stuff. That's kind of the situation. But it relatively happens to be a thing. So 3.5 out of 10, and I would say like also like the social score, I will give like a 5.5 out of 10, because some of these singles are good, but it just depends upon your tolerance for how youthful this project is. It's not to say it's bad. For some folks this might be right up their alley, but just to kind of say 5.5 out of 10. And most of the singles work. You may like more of them or less of them than I do. But that's just kind of the concept. In terms of the future, I'm not really sure if Lil Mama's going to come back. I think at this stage it's safe to say that she's not going to, just because it's been 14 years since she's dropped anything minus a mixtape. But just to kind of say, this is a decent project that does have some cuts worth checking out, but you just have to kind of be able to dissect it and decide for what you want from it.